GSA is an enabler of all missions across government. Things are going to start to move faster, right? So as AI takes hold in the government for these types of roles, acquisition roles, procurement roles, things are going to move faster, but there's always going to be a person on the other side of that.
Trump signs this executive order centralizing procurement under GSA, using GSA more for certain things. What do you think this means?
The central contracting is going to be that place where common administrative products and services will be purchased out of.
If you're already a company that sells something, a service or a product that's non-mission related, do you need a GSA schedule?
The companies that are selling in that space already have them.
What is GSA involved in? Why is it grown 50%?
So the big picture is,
first of all, Kevin, thanks for coming on. We've known each other for a long time. How's everything going?
it's going great. It's different being in a different capacity. I'm used to seeing you in the Air Force capacity, and you're used to seeing me in the GSA capacity. So it's just a different day.
Yeah, so you're wearing a Odyssey jacket. That doesn't escape me. And I've been prepping the audience and the people in our training program as well for this, because you worked at GSA in multiple capacities for a long time and just recently separated. And it's April 2025.
Yeah.
We're recording this. So you're fresh from GSA right now.
I'm on day 8 in Odyssey after 21 years with GSA, 23 years total with government. I had 2 years at DHS too. Just departed there less than a month ago, and excited to be here, but still mourning my time with them because I love that. I love GSA.
Yeah.
It was a great place to work. It still is a great place to work. Things moved and I need to shift with them.
Oh yeah. No, I hear you, man. I mean, so first of all, it was great working with you over the years. I'm glad we were able to stay in touch. Nobody knows more about GSA than you do. And GSA could be
a few people that know way more than me, but I appreciate that.
That I know of. I found it hard to understand GSA because GSA is a federal organization, but it's also referred to as like the GSA Schedules. It's referred to as a contract vehicle almost.
Yeah.
And so it's misunderstood by a lot of companies on how to use it. And you add to that Trump's recent executive order, which we're going to talk about, right? And really pushing increased use of GSA, which has a lot of businesses, sales executives wondering if they need a GSA schedule. That's our teaser for what they'll see later in the episode. But for now, can you just quickly, let's just talk about your experience in GSA. What did you do in GSA? Yeah, what did you do in GSA?
So I started at GSA as a GS7. I had been in a different grade at DHS when I was in law enforcement there, and I took a few steps back and came over to GSA in 2005, and I was a contract specialist right away and worked with a lot of great people in the public building service. And over there, worked in the public building service side of GSA that runs all the real estate for most of the federal government, whether it's in a federal building or a leased space.
So that in and of itself might be something people are wondering about. The government owns real estate. The government owns these buildings, and the public building service is a thing. So they're an office within GSA.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. They're a huge office in GSA and a lot of great people. It's like a giant real estate firm within the government. And they do have federal buildings where they're managing their own buildings, but they also have leases where they're working with private sector in using commercial space. So spent about 10 years there managing partnerships.
Do real estate agents have a way to sell to the government then? Did you work with real estate, like commercial realtors, or is there any small business opportunity in the real estate space?
Yeah. So there's a lot of small business involvement in helping manage the federal buildings, right? So the GSA today, the way they contract is they buy operation and maintenance services, janitorial services, which are largely reserved for Ability One partnerships, lighthouses, things of that nature. But O&M, construction, everything under the sun that takes care of a federal building. And then for the real estate side, when we're going to the private sector, they're working with brokers like CBRE and JLL, things like that, who are working with local community, commercial investors for office space to find the right space for the GSA agency partners.
Interesting. And so do they need, and we'll get into this way more later, but do those opportunities with brokers Do those companies need a GSA schedule to do business with GSA?
No, no,
Okay.
no. So the leasing side is it's a there's no like government-wide lease. There's government-wide broker. The GSA has like a GSA-wide broker contract with the CBREs and JLLs, but for like real estate, getting a lease, they're very much it's an individual action. Now things could change. I've been on PBS for 10 years, and now I know there's a lot of talk about restructuring the federal footprint in terms of office space, federal buildings and things of that nature. And there's people that are really have so much more insight and expertise in that area, but I know there's a shift going on. But at the same time, we have to care and feed for our existing portfolio of real estate. So the business isn't going away. It just may shift a little bit.
Sure.
There's lots of opportunity for small businesses in terms of office office owners and also small business and service companies.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So, I mean, already you've provided enough value. In fact, let's just end the interview now. And then other real estate people and services people can start looking at the GSA stuff. But no, we're going to get way more in depth with that. We're still on your background, right? So, what did you do after that?
Yeah, so I was there for about 10 years. And what was cool, I'll tell you, I got to do really cool things with PBS. I worked with Congress for a while, doing their space out in New England. And I also worked with a lot of DHS and DOJ. One of my clients for a while was the FBI. So after the Boston bombings, and this is like real mission stuff, right? So
Yeah.
they came to us, and myself and another person went out to Black Falcon Pier in Boston, and we found all the evidence you could ever see in one place. And they said, "Help us find a place to put this." Right. And that's the type of stuff that GSA is doing on a regular basis, because the agencies like DOJ, FBI, they have to have space that is secure enough that they can do the type of business they do. And whether that's housing evidence for the next 100 years, so a terrorist doesn't get out of prison, or making sure that there's just safe space for their employees to do their everyday work. That's a core business set for GSA. And so after I left there, I went to work in the Federal Acquisition Services, which is the other big part of GSA. And I think that's a core of what I'll discuss today, Rick, and has really been my passion for the last 10 or so years. And in the Federal Acquisition Service, they have multiple products. And what I do is I compare them to make it really easy. I either compare them to a brokerage or a gas station. So when I used to tell the story about the GSA and FAST, when I first went out to the Air Force and no one knew about us, yet we've been an agency since 1949.
Yeah.
I'd say, hey, just think of us as a gas station. You can either pump the gas yourself, or you can have someone fill it up for you. The tanks in the middle, those are our contracts. In those contracts, you can buy anything you want off of them. And then I realized, you go to New Jersey, they make you pump your gas all the time. So
Yeah.
it just wasn't holding up. And so it's more of a brokerage analogy, right? So when you're investing with Fidelity or Schwab, they have mutual funds, index funds, individual stocks. GSA is very similar, right? And our mutual funds and our stocks and our index funds, those are giant contracts that allow agencies to invest their money in any type of service or product they can think of buying. And they can either use a full service broker, which would be the assisted acquisition service and soon to be the new central contracting in GSA, or they can do it themselves by placing orders off of these large IDIQ contracts.
Sure. And that gets into basically, hey, what is GSA, right? And what are the different mechanisms that the government uses it for? Maybe now is a good time to pause. Okay, so you've been with the GSA for a while. You were at the public building service, is that right? And then you went into 10 years later, the acquisition service, the Federal Acquisition Service, both arms of GSA.
Yeah.
But we didn't really talk about, we just alluded to it. What is GSA? You mentioned this has been around since the 40s. So why was GSA created?
There's probably different opinions on this. You'd have to look at the legislation, but I think the bottom line, GSA is an enabler of all missions across government, right? So they provide the administrative support, the management services that the rest of government requires to operate. So GSA is basically a force multiplier to other agencies and a place where the government can find efficiency when it comes to managing things like real estate and procurement. The fleet is a big thing within the GSA, where the GSA manages the majority of the government fleet vehicles, right? So minus parts of DoD, any car on the road has been either leased or acquired by GSA, who is then leasing it to another agency so they can do their work. So think of it as like this G&A bucket that allows government to really be efficient in these administrative matters, but also in mission related matters as well.
I want to take a quick second to talk to anybody watching this that's interested in starting a government contracting business or starting a new profession in government contracting. The students that graduate our program, they go on to start their own consulting firms, winning high dollar consulting clients. They go on to land high paying salaried positions as account executives with companies that sell to the government. I'm so proud of the people that have gone through our program. And if you are considering either a job or a business, and by the way, some of our students are doing both, as I did. They're running a consulting business and they'll have an account executive job. It's transforming their lives. It's bringing true wealth to them and their families. Back to the video. Administrative and mission, but is that as it relates to procurement and spending? Because I always thought of GSA as the organization that was created to either centralize or streamline procurement for federal agencies. And then from its original concept has evolved into doing different things. So it never, I don't know if that's the history you understand, but maybe it's been a little long since I've read through the books that made it down college, but I feel like it never really took over all of the procurement for all the federal agencies, but like you said, enabled them or made it easier for certain agencies in certain areas.
Yeah, certainly originally GSA was a mandatory source of certain supplies and services around procurement. So the global supply program within GSA, it's housed in what's called the General Schedules and Supply. And it's called GSNS to me, right? So it's housed in this one portfolio today. It's going to be housed somewhere else differently. That used to be mandatory for agencies to use back before Clara Cohen happened in the 1990s.
So for supplies, so what would you define supplies as?
So pens, paper, anything that you can buy as a product, anything that is, anything in a product that you can think of, wrenches, tools.
So if my Air Force office if I just needed office supplies, I couldn't go to, when it was mandatory, I couldn't go to whatever they had back in the 90s Sears and buy office supplies. I would have to go to GSA and say, hey, we need 1,000 pens or whatever it was.
So then the purchase would be made and delivered to your office.
Okay.
And same thing with real estate. Real estate back then GSA was a mandatory source. And for the most part, it still is today, but there are exemptions and agencies have much more flexibility today in the real estate space.
Yeah, I mean, it's at least when I think of GSA, one of the confusing points for me, which I mentioned at the beginning, was, okay, this is a different agency? Because I remember seeing you show up in my office. So I tell people I flew for the first half of my career. So I'm showing up to acquisitions as a major, almost lieutenant colonel that had been flying, and I knew nothing. So I'm learning really fast.
You were working with Maddie too, so it was going even faster.
Maddie is a legend, and I need to bring him on.
When you bring him on, you better bring me on too.
Yeah, I'll bring you on too. We'll have a GovCon happy hour, and we could talk about it. Me and Maddie actually went to the same private all boys Catholic high school. Only he went about 2 decades before me, and
he is an old man, and I hope he is watching this, so he hears that from me.
I'm going to send him the episode. So I'm just going to tease everyone. Maddie, there's the Ben Kenobi of government contracting that probably one of the only people I'd say knows more than even Kevin taught me everything that I did. But I'm not going to drop his last name because I don't want him to. That's my resource. But yeah, so I remember seeing you show up and be like, hey, this is Kevin with GSA. I'm like, oh, that's great. And talking about like, hey, using GSA to put stuff on contract. What I was thinking is a program manager who had contracting officers. I'm like, why do I need another organization to do any of this when I have contracting officers and I have engineers and finance people and everything? But then what I learned as I was going through this is the government can't just put somebody on contract. We need a way. The government needs and this is what makes it complicated for businesses to understand. We need a mechanism to put somebody on contract for anything. That mechanism could be a open competition where a solicitation comes out and 100 companies submit a proposal, and then we have a team of people who review everything, and then you win a contract. It could be, like if you're an 8A company, it could be a sole source contract, right? And there's a mechanism, there's a law that allows us to do that. But then there's a variety of things like contract vehicles and government-wide GWACs, big contract vehicles. There's GSA, which I lump into that category, but it's not, it's a little bit different. But now these vehicles, you as a company can apply to be on a vehicle or on a contract. And so for something that's not GSA, like a NASA suit, maybe every couple of years, a solicitation comes out. You have to wait for the solicitation. Then you have to compete. It's a pain in the butt, right? You eventually get on or not. And once you're on it, it doesn't mean that you actually win anything. You don't have, all you are is you're on a contract that has a ceiling where the government can spend up to a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
$5 billion doesn't mean you get any of it. And now when the government, if it was for cybersecurity services, if the government wants to buy cybersecurity services and that agency can use like a NASA suit contract, all it means is now if the government decides to use that vehicle, you have the ability to bid on that opportunity. GSA, what I soon learned is companies can apply to be on GSA basically at any point, unless you guys restrict it, but I don't know if that. It could take a while.
For the schedule, yeah. The schedules, it's evergreen. The contracts are always open to bid. But Rick, I think of it as in hierarchical terms.
Yeah.
You've got large, and for people watching this, there's a type of contract called an indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery contract, and they're typically multiple award. When the government tries to do a single award one, they have to justify it for specific purposes. So for the most part, they're multiple award contracts. And you have these large umbrella IDIQ contracts, and there's different versions of them across government, agency-specific IDIQs, and then you have government-wide type IDIQs. And those IDIQs sit at the umbrella level. And then below those, that umbrella level, you have specific tasks. And again, they could be just under an agency-specific one. They can be just for the agency. Under a multi-agency IDIQ, they can be for multiple agencies. Under government-wide, they can be for any agency under the government. And GSA has the largest government-wide IDIQs because that is their mission, right? Is to put those government-wide contracts up so agencies can be more efficient and quicker to buy the services and products that they need. And
any agency, meaning anyone can use it.
Any agency.
Right.
And in the case of the schedules, even state and local and certain nonprofits can buy from the GSA schedule. So
That's
the multiple award schedule program, the abbreviations MAS, because we all need abbreviations and acronyms in government. You call it MAS or the schedules. That is a government-wide strategy for contracting to create efficiency at a government-wide level for procurement purposes, because it's expensive to build IDIQs.
Yeah.
So if you do it at one time at scale and allow contractors to bid at any moment, you're theoretically being more efficient in terms of operating a contracting office.
Yeah.
Contracting offices are very expensive to run.
If I could give an example, right? So as I was working through, going back, put my Air Force hat back on. So, hey, why is Kevan here? Why is GSA here? Why do I need it? So I would realize, in what I've told businesses, is you want to give the government as many ways to buy from you as possible. Like that is what is going to increase your opportunities. And I realized, and I was doing tech development at the time, there were companies that I wanted to put on contract that I couldn't, meaning they weren't on contract with the government. They didn't have a schedule. They weren't on our IDIQ, because we would put IDIQs together, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of time. So after my meeting with you, Maddie, the Ben Kenobi of acquisitions, he explained to me, hey, if a company is on GSA, if they are already on this schedule, then now we can go to Kevan, and Kevan can work with us and to get them on contract. They've already been through the vetting process. So we don't have to do a 2-year or a year long or however long it's going to be to build a contract out, to compete it, try to get them on. They're already on with GSA. And by the way, not only are they on the schedule, but now they have people that can actually manage the contract for us and handle the effort, which, to your point, does take a lot of the work out of the hands of the acquisitions office. And it's amazing for the companies because it gives them a way they can go into a government office and say, hey, I'm on GSA if you want to use that as the contracting mechanism.
Or yeah, Rick, most agencies are using the contracts on their own. So their program management, project management, and contracting officers are acquiring whatever they need directly from the contracts. Now so GSA FAS is $110 billion or so organization a year. It's grown 50% in the last 5 years overall.
Oh, wow.
in
And by
terms
the way, also I want to put a bow on this history lesson, right? Because it went from original concept of GSA, mandatory for things like supplies till the 90s, then maybe not mandatory, but it has grown. GSA is used for a lot of things beyond supplies, right?
Right.
Can you give me like a
Yes.
1 minute from 90s to now? Like, what is GSA involved in? And why has it grown 50%?
Yeah, I wasn't around in the 90s. I was still in high school, but and I probably got the history completely wrong, oversimplifying it.
Eh.
So the big picture is it's a $110 billion organization today.
Okay.
When an agency doesn't have a procurement shop, they can go to the assisted acquisition service. And that's a $10 billion organization. And they do all the acquisition for an agency from planning to execution and administration. But most agencies are just using the contracts. And like, I'll give you an example. So my team, a few years ago, when I was still a regional director, I had moved on later in my time with GSA to be more of a national director. Well, at the regional level, my team worked with the Air Force, and we supported the Air Force in buying the cloud. So Cloud One for the Air Force, we worked with them to make sure that our contracts could align with their needs and to show them how the market would play out within certain contracts. And they ended up using one of our GWACs, the Alliance /Alliant 2 vehicle. I think it is the Alliant 2 vehicle. They purchased that Cloud One originally off of Alliant 2. Now, I don't know where it is today, but that's one example, right? So that's a multi-million-dollar, more than millions of dollars acquisition that the Air Force used our vehicle for.
And what is Cloud One, just for anyone that's not familiar?
So yeah, that's the Air Force's version of, so the Air Force needed cloud services. They needed infrastructure and they needed the ability to do whatever cloud does, right? And they went and they got it through one of the service providers from in GSA. I forget the contractor specifically, but I know it wasn't just one prime doing it all with a variety of different companies to actually pull off the cloud for the Air Force. And the Air Force listening to this is probably like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. The point of the story is you can buy anything under these contracts. They're huge.
Okay. And by the way, anyone can just Google Cloud One if they want to learn a little bit more. We've done interviews with people on things like Cloud One and FedRAMP and some of the different initiatives that are out.
FedRAMP's another part of GSA. It's part of our technology transformation service, which is being restructured like with the rest of the Federal Acquisition Service today.
And you guys also
SAM.gov.
SAM.gov?
Yep, that's part of the Federal Acquisition Service. We manage that. We manage that website for all the government. It's part of the shared service aspect of GSA, and that is all funded through what's called the industrial funding fee. So when an agency uses one of GSA's contracts, they pay a fee that passes through the contractor to GSA. The fees they range from a tenth of 1% to 3/4 of 1%. So like, to put that in perspective, for every $1 million DHS spends on one of GSA's contracts, if they're using the schedules, they pay $7,500. But if the Air Force is using the GSA Oasis or Oasis Plus contract, large professional service contracts, they're paying $1,000 for every $1 million they spend. So that money goes to a bigger fund that manages all sorts of shared services, including SAM.gov, so the rest of the government can execute procurement and the management of vendor relationships, contract relationships.
Yeah.
Accurately.
Can I ask you a question since I brought up sam.gov. So, but a lot of people the people that are in, for instance, our GovClose certification program, we spend a lot of time on researching federal spending, identifying opportunities early when when the RFP comes, stuff like that. But sam.gov is used for some of that. One question for you, for the audience is, do opportunities that are coming out on GSA schedules, so if I'm a schedule holder, my company went through the process with GSA for, I don't know, whatever it is. I said cybersecurity before, services or something, but let's just say it's something like that. I know that I have access to an opportunity that's going to come through GSA to bid on it if it's going to be competitive. Does it go through sam.gov as well?
99% of the time, if it's being put on, the requirement is being acquired off a GSA contract, 99% of the time you will not see on sam.gov. Once a contractor is retained under GSA Schedule or one of the GWACs, they have access to another set of tools that allow for them to have insight into what type of requirements are coming off those contracts. So that the main tool is called eBuy, GSA eBuy, and that's where they would be seeing requirements. Now, obviously, there's service providers that are commercial sort of software that can track all of this. So in GSA, believe it or not, we used GovWin a lot to see across, and I'm not endorsing GovWin or anything like that. We even used a service to see across all of the requirements and do research, but we used it from a different perspective, right? We didn't use it for research for our own contracts. We used it to understand what the other agencies across government were doing so we could help them be more efficient. So if we saw, for instance, the Army standing up a giant IVIQ, we would then go in and say, hey, do you know that you can meet that same scope under GSA Alliant 2, 8A stars, and even the GSA schedules? And so you don't have to build it yourself, right?
Yeah. That's interesting that you guys were even using a GovWin IQ. Within our program, have done a bunch of videos on using USA Spending, which I'm assuming GSA also runs. Is that usaspending.gov? Did you guys?
USA Spending, yeah. So the USA Spending was built by our technology transformation service. I actually spoke to the contractor that built USA Spend the other day. He had a really interesting story. I'll have to connect you to him at some point.
Yeah.
The architect of that brilliant person does a lot of work with GSA. And so we do run that, and we run SAM. And the backbone of SAM is a commercial product called MicroStrategy. You may know MicroStrategy because they're the fourth largest owner of Bitcoin in the world.
Mm.
Their software is where you can organize and grab data on the back end of SAM as well. And that's where a lot of these companies are pulling data from. They API into SAM, or they're actually going into SAM and manipulating it on the back end through these tools that are really easy to use. But when you don't have 100 people on your back office doing this, it's much easier to go to a company that does this as their bread and butter.
GovWin IQ. I mean, it's expensive for any small businesses out there, but it's really good for research. And when I'm doing this type of work for companies, it's much easier. For instance, just an example, if I go into USA Spending, I can pull. And by the way, I'm saying this out loud because hopefully you're going to say, "Hey, Rick, you're missing something. You can hit this magic button and get what you need." But okay, let's say I'm looking at a NAICS code in USA Spending. It could be for anything, right? Like construction services. And now I could go into each of the individual. Let's say I look for construction, anything under a NAICS code for the past 3 years. It'll show me all the solicitations. It'll show me like spending by year.
Right.
It'll break me down. It'll show me the agency spending, and I can have one kind of way to go and look at the sub agency. But if I want to know the exact office, for instance, that is doing the contracting, I have to go open up an individual contract, which it has in there, and I can look and it'll show me like the office code. Let's say like Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, blah, blah, blah.
So all of those codes, Rick, are managed at a OMB, and there's like a hierarchical like coding for you see it play out in FPDSNG, right? You have contracting office codes, you have program office codes, you have funding office codes. That's a hierarchical data structure. Like, so if I was to build a CRM, I would build my CRM accounts based on that structure because you want to align with government when you're selling, right? So you
Yeah.
want to know this is the funding agency, this is the program office, and this is the contracting office, and these are the codes. And so when you're doing your research and then you're filling in your CRM, you're aligning perfectly. You know you're accurate, right? So you have a basis, and that's how I would do it, and that's how the government does it. So just for context to those codes.
Oh yeah, no, and I mean, I guess my point was just if I'm a company and I want to know which office specifically I'm selling to, right? I can get some of that information from USA Spending, but if I want to know, like, okay, I want to know the government office, not the service, but if I want to know, like, down to what program office is like the number one spender involved with construction that's putting out solicitations and shit like that for construction services.
Yeah.
I can go to Government IQ and it'll break it down from top to bottom with specificity. I'm sure there's a little like,
Or you just know it's PBS or VA or DOD. I mean, those are the. I mean, I know Army Corps does it, but those are the three.
yeah, those are big picture. But like if I wanted to know that, like
you go to GovWin and break it down that way. And
yeah,
we have data scientists in the back end. I was lucky enough to have access to just data scientists that did that all day long. So I missed those days of being able to see. So our folks every year when we were doing this, right, we would go and look at expiring contracts and pull all expiring contracts out of SAM, which comes from FPDS, right? Then we would go through a prioritization of those expiring contracts based on the attributes we were looking for, whether it was fixed price cost, was it the right NAICS code, did it fit our contracts?
Yep.
And then we were prioritized based on relationships or where we had them. Then based on that priority list, which we built in Excel, then we would populate it into our CRM and form our plans to then go speak to those agencies and influence them to move away from the open market and spend under GSA because it was more efficient for government.
Now that's interesting because now we're talking about, so it's funny, GSA, the federal organization, using that data to target other federal agencies to get them to use GSA. We talk a lot about how companies can use that data to find.
Yeah. And I think I think the new administration sees how ridiculous that is.
That is ridiculous, right? I don't want to say it. I don't want to I'm not going to.
No, it's ridiculous.
That sounds insane to me. Like, why is a federal agency, you're basically marketing to you're building a CRM, you're marketing, you're trying to sell and GSA to other federal agencies.
Whether you're building a CRM or not, you need a CRM to manage relationships no matter. Their goal. So I tell people this story. My dad, he's got one of these beautiful minds, right? So I come onto Odyssey the other day and there's a woman who works out at Hanscom Air Force Base and she's presenting to us. And I called her afterwards because she's just amazing, right? She's talking about people and how important people are. And that's one of the number one things I have, right? And so she says, yeah, I'm from Lowell, Mass. I go, my family's from Lowell, Mass. And we start talking. My father, best friends with her husband.
Kidding.
And all this stuff. Because I called him afterwards. He's like, oh, I know Artie. I used to be a security guard with Artie at Lowell General Hospital back in the 80s. And he was the commissioner of the police force and telling me all these amazing stories. But one day I'm not going to be able to get those stories anymore.
Yeah.
And that's where, it says to me, I got to get up there and talk to my dad about these stories more. But when you apply that to business, right? So people are always going in and out of businesses, right? So you need a place where you can collect your stories. So you have that historical perspective of relationships.
Yeah.
So you can continue to open doors wherever I go today. My father opens doors for me because he's like this incredible extrovert and has this beautiful mind that he can remember people's names. He knew where this woman lived and grew up from the 1960s. And
he's from Lowell. I mean, he's from
Chelmsford. He's from Chelmsford, Mass, and she's from Lowell, and he knows her address. He's not a stalker, by the way.
Okay.
But that's the type of thing why you need those CRM systems, because there's plenty of beautiful minds in your organization. And I'm not a Salesforce salesperson or a HubSpot salesperson.
Yeah.
But from a consistency point of view, you need those. The government uses them, and you can get them on a small scale and be very effective and not kill your budget.
Oh yeah. I mean, in fact, we have one. We built one for government contracting.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's awesome. Did all of our students use, everyone that graduates uses it. And then some companies, I built it for my clients because they didn't have anything. Like, I mean, I don't want this to be a CRM conversation.
But the point of the matter
Right.
is, yeah, it's ridiculous that GSA is selling itself to other agencies. That's why they're shifting right now, because that's not efficient.
No.
So
Yes, let's
you
talk
have
about
to
that
bring it
because
back to your original mission. Let's make sure you get that efficiency in some way, and that's why they're building their new central contracting shop today.
okay, let's stop. Let's just start here. Trump signs this executive order that basically, as I read it, and I've heard different people talk about what they think it means and heard 100 different versions of what it means. I have my own thoughts, but it said something to the extent of centralizing procurement under GSA, using GSA more for certain things. I don't even want to say more than that. I want to ask you, what do you think this means, especially in light of the fact that we've slashed personnel from a bunch of federal agencies, including GSA?
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, right? We've got a lot of minds going out the door, and hopefully, I know they'll find great spots, right? But a lot of them will come back. The central contracting, from my understanding, is going to be that place where those common administrative products and services, workplace products and services, think furniture and like office supplies, mouses, all that stuff. You can buy that, but also like services, just general supportive services for the government
Mhm.
will be purchased out of. Now, I don't know the specifics of the scope. I would imagine if someone wanted to argue with me over this on LinkedIn the other day, that once they identify the categories of those services and supplies, which will be at like a PSC, product service code level, then what they'll do is they'll deep dive into each of the agency's contracts and look at the NAICS codes of those contracts, and whatever specific NAICS codes in that category that are not mission related, those things will shift to GSA for spending,
That's
right?
interesting.
In direct contracting. All the mission related stuff, a combat cloud for the Air Force, that will never be bought by the central contracting that GSA is standing up. Now, if the
But
Air
it could
Force,
be under a NAICS code for, so this is where like the argument for, I've seen 10 different contracting officers use 10 different NAICS codes to buy the exact same thing.
right?
So you could have software publishers, could be Cloud One could fall under,
That's a whole different story. We to get
Yeah.
into one,
or it could have been done with like another transaction authority. I mean, I don't think it was.
right? So as OTAs, all that stuff. But for the most part, your direct mission support, as the DoD will call it, that won't go to GSA
Gotcha.
unless
But
they
like
don't have
landscaping services would.
yeah, that kind of stuff. Now that if they don't have capacity, there'll be another service within GSA, and it already exists, GSA AAS, that can do that type of work for them, and it is already doing a lot of that type of work, right? So
Yeah.
when I was a competition advocate, or when we were regionalized, one of our biggest clients was the Army of Aberdeen CBRN, basically
Mhm.
biological warfare stuff. And we had NC3 doing nuclear command and control stuff. Those types of things will never be purchased by GSA unless the agency says, I don't have capacity. I need your people to do this acquisition.
Yeah. I mean, so when I think of GSA, not being like an expert in GSA, and the way that I've always helped and coached my small businesses that I worked with, even larger businesses, has been especially on the question of GSA. Do I need GSA? Do I need the GSA schedule?
Yeah, you do.
What I've always done, yeah, so that might be the answer now, and this is where we're getting. In the past, what I always would do is I would use the tools I had available to me, both government and others, to look at federal spending. And I'd say, okay, here's your NAICS, PSC, generalized. Let's look at the past 3 years and let's see how much GSA has been involved. And with some things like office supplies, I think pharmaceuticals too is like a really high one where we're seeing like the majority of thing you like going through GSA. It's very clear, right? You need a GSA schedule. Then we look at other services or things that you're selling, right? Maybe accounting services or something. And then we might see, at least from the data that was given to me, and maybe this is how, maybe you could clarify it, it would look like maybe 10% of purchases went through GSA across the federal government. And so then for something else, my answer might be, well, you don't need GSA because I can see that they're buying with their GWACs, their sole sources, all this other stuff. Might be a nice to have though, because it's not going to hurt What's your answer to that? Like, especially now. So now with the executive order, I'm like, now if I looked up landscaping services right now and saw 20% of it going, I'm just making that up. If I saw 20% of contracts for landscaping services go through GSA for the past 3 years, I might tell a landscaping company before this executive order that GSA is a nice to have, but you don't need it. Here's some other way.
Yeah. So
But
it,
now
it
I'm thinking they
depends.
do.
It really depends. And this is one of the exercises they're doing right now. So they're identifying internally on the schedules, they're what are called special item numbers. They're basically plans. It's just GSA's way of categorizing their contracts. A contract line item is what's called a CLIN. And then you have seed rolls, which are deliverables under typical contracts. But under the schedules, they're looking at low spend or low obligation CLINs, and they're analyzing why is that. And if there is a reason, so for instance, like typical commercial products that are really, and I mentioned pens and paper and stuff like that. That stuff's going to go to what we call the commercial platforms. GSA has contracts with Amazon, like the big commercial platform providers, like for different categories of those types of consumables. That stuff will be canceled off their schedules. Those schedule sins, because they'll probably go away. No one's told me that. Don't go freaking out if you're in industry, you sell that stuff through GSA schedules today. But you're going to be fishing from the agencies are going to be buying that from Amazon because it's just way more efficient. They're going to be buying medical supplies and stuff from Fisher Scientific and all the commercial platforms that are out there. Go to GSA.gov commercial platforms. They've done an incredible job at building those. It's about a $50 million a year program right now or more. It's going to grow exponentially. That'll be in the billions at some point, someday, because just everything's going to flow through that. It might not be in the billions, but it'll be in the hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
So, and I'm talking about over 5 years because they're 5-year contracts. So I'm not talking about like $100 million annually. That's unrealistic. That's just not.
Yeah.
But for the stuff like IT services, professional services, that stuff there's going to be always a need for large government-wide IDIQs. You'll never see those IDIQs go away. If they do, then the income stream for GSA will go away and the agency will the Federal Acquisition Service will no longer be viable.
When you say the government-wide IDIQs, are we talking about GSA schedules or are you talking about something like NASA SOUP?
No, so GSA has the schedules, which are government-wide IDIQs.
Okay.
They're a different version. Ordering is under Part 8, and there's different parts of the FAR that they cover. And then they have government-wide acquisition contracts, which are aligned to 8A stars. Forget what number on that. I think they're on 3. Polaris, which has been this never-ending solicitation because it keeps getting protested. And then that's 2. Those, and then plus Oasis Plus, which is a MAC, multi-agency contract, and the old version of Oasis. Those are government IDIQs at GSA space. NASA SOUP, NIH, I don't know what the plans are there. I would imagine those are, without burning anybody, I imagine there's a plan to probably consolidate them into the GSA GUACs and MACs and IDIQs. I do know that it's being explored. It's been for a long time because the schedules are a commercial type contract, right? So what that means is under a schedule, you can only do firm fixed price type contracting or T&M for the most part, time and materials, because they're purchased under what's called FAR Part 12, which is commercial item contracting. Do you know for a long time, and this started back with the previous professional services category manager, who was a brilliant person. She left GSA recently. For a long time, she was exploring bringing non-commercial items into the schedules. And I think her vision is starting to play out. And they're really examining bringing non-commercial cost type contracts, Oasis Plus, the GWACs, which also can do fixed price and do commercial. They're thinking about consolidating because it's really expensive to run, like the siloed contracts, even for GSA.
Yeah.
So let's put it all under one umbrella. Let's change this. Let's work to the statutes and what the law says, as opposed to just being confined by the regulations. And I think what industry should be aware of and maybe starting to think about is what happens if some of these contracts we're used to selling under start to sunset and move to the schedules, which is a huge contract already, right? how are we going to change with that? And do we have the right categories under that contract to sell to? And who knows what it's going to look like. But I think there's lots of talk about that and plans, and as they start to look at legislative proposals that they're going to put in front of Congress to change federal acquisition federal acquisition regulations, really.
So if I was going to
Out
boil,
there.
if I was going to boil all that down to something that a company could understand for,
Sorry.
no, that's great. And all of that, I think if you listen to that and you're thinking, what does that mean for me? Like, especially if
Well, here's what it means.
yeah, go ahead.
It's important to have partnerships it's either important to own some of these contracts so you can fish in those holes in the schedules, especially.
Yeah.
Because you can easily modify a contract as opposed to like having to bid it. It's important to own it. And it's also
own it, and very important, because if federal agencies are going to move away from the way they've been buying to using GSA, and you're a company that's been selling to federal agencies and you do not have a GSA schedule, and it takes 6 to 12 months to get onto a GSA schedule.
Yeah. But
you find yourself left.
Yeah, I don't think I'm
This
explaining this right. So
Okay.
it's important to try to get the contract if you can, but also have partnerships with people that already have these contracts. So if you sell a product that is just not efficient to license, to have a contract with the government, you can resell through other contractors.
Okay.
If you have software you want to resell, there's conglomerate contractors that you can resell from.
Happens all the time.
You have to have partnerships. The other thing is, this doesn't mean that federal agencies are necessarily going to use GSA more or less. Yes, in the administrative centralization, they're going to be using GSA more, or they're going to be relying on GSA contracting more. Or those mission-related items that aren't being centralized, they could or couldn't, they might or might not be using GSA more. But
Okay.
$110 billion a year organization that people are using, agencies are using.
So if you're a company that sells something, a service or a product that's non-mission related, do you need a GSA schedule? Should they be getting a GSA schedule?
They already have them. The companies that are selling in that space already have them. They're going to be modding those contracts for the most part. All businesses that have them and that hold the GWACs and MACs, they're going to be modding their contracts. And that's going to happen automatically as the process plays out.
Okay.
And that's for GSA to communicate with industry as their strategy takes hold and takes shape. They're in the infancy stages of this, from what I'm hearing. But it's going to start moving if it does take hold. And that's where you see the GSA schedule consolidation that happened a few years back. That's going to start maturing even more. You're going to see that program expand even more than it already is.
Yeah. A lot of small businesses aren't in the space yet, haven't sold anything to the government. So if they are, partnerships is where that you'd start if you were them. So I'm a landscaping business, look at partnerships before I start looking at.
Hey, the company I work for now, Odyssey, we have schedules. We have the Oasis Plus and Oasis contract. We're always looking for partners and good people to work with. We're a small business that in this space, and we're in the C2 space. We're in the engineering space. We're airborne platform space, supporting the Air Force and Army, EHA, and life sciences. So we're always looking for partners with creative solutions to do work with the government and really highly technical people that can serve the government. That's why I'm here, because it's like I'm still serving the mission of the government. And that's what's always driven me, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's it.
Everything.
That's why actually it's a great plug for Odyssey. So you left GSA, you went to work for Odyssey, and we talked with Odyssey. They may come on and do an episode with us as well. Maybe if someone is interested in that type of partnership,
yeah,
I can get you in touch with Kevin, right? You guys can talk about how maybe Odyssey can help them out.
And I might not speak. I'll probably get in touch with someone else, but I'll just tell you. So my new role at Odyssey, so I was the director of Office of Customer Care for GSA, where I managed all the customer service for the Federal Acquisition Service.
Right.
I didn't touch on that at all. I also managed the Market Research as a Service. I was the founder and creator. It does requests for information across government. We did 5,000 last year when I first started helping people at Hanscom Air Force Base. We did like 50 for the first year. And over the last 10 years, we've just scaled up to 5,000 through automation and stuff like that. And then I ran all the rating in terms of what agencies think of the Federal Acquisition Service. I did all of that analysis with my team on an annual basis so we can improve our products and services. So now I'm over at Odyssey. I joined Matt Casberg and Kevin Conley and team over here to be their vice president of corporate integration as they start to scale and look at different ways to grow and expand partnerships. So I'm over talent acquisition, our technical center, our quality, and our enterprise alignment. And we're really looking forward. I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, day 8, I'm still learning, but I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, no, this is awesome. This is a great, it's always, for me, it's always been a great time transitioning out of one organization into the other. So hopefully this experience has been awesome for you so far. I know it's only been 8 days and you're still thinking about it. We'll probably do another episode on Odyssey. I'm absolutely going to have you back on here to talk about, there's a lot of things that I want to cover in another episode.
Yeah, because I did a brain dump today, and like I think maybe if we target one specific area that your audience wants to hear more about, we can
Yeah.
dig into that, and I can also do some research on my own, right, to make sure y'all have the latest and greatest. But if I was to leave you with a couple things, it's partnerships across your industry partner groups, right, and having those relationships. It's through data and understanding data and organizing that data for yourself and making sure you're targeted with what you're trying to accomplish, because otherwise the government data can overwhelm you, and then just focus on what's core to you and your business and where you want to go as a group. And then find relationships that, like I said, with partnerships, find relationships can help you expand in that space and get you to a good place. There's lots of opportunity out there, and there's lots of people that want to work with small businesses. And there's lots of government agencies like GSA that do too. So there's whole groups that help small businesses. And, I think the sky's the limit, right? So, because there's lots of opportunities and going away in the federal space, that's for sure.
No, definitely not. Hey, thanks for coming on here, Kevin. This has
Yeah.
been awesome. Anybody out there, first of all, if you want to get in touch with Kevin, check out check out the show notes. Drop a comment when you're watching this if you want our GSA prep checklist, and I can also get you in touch with Kevin if you want to talk to him about GSA related matters or something with Odyssey. He can get you in touch with the right folks over there. We have a video on getting onto the GSA schedule that you may want to check out. And of course, the training and GovClose goes much into data, understanding federal spending, which Kevin was just talking about as the main point, goes into how important relationships are. This is really the thing that gets lost on people is with all of the regulations and policy, there is another person on the other side of the computer / phone call, whatever, in a federal office that's going to be involved with putting you on contract. And
Right.
it's one of the reasons these relationships mean so much. And whether
And things are going to start to move faster, right? So as AI takes hold in the government for these types of roles, acquisition roles, procurement roles, things are going to move faster, but there's always going to be a person on the other side of that. So relationships are key to everything. And that's one of the reasons I'm at Odyssey, right? Because of relationships and because of mission, right? And
yeah,
those are two central things. If you're passionate about mission and you're passionate about people, you're going to be a success in this space. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I did so well at GSA, is because it was all about the people there and the mission. And like MRAS, I'm still passionate about the Market Research as a Service program. If you see those RFIs, I'm going to put a plug in for, even if you don't have all the information, respond so you can get the agency POC and engage with that person on the other end, so you can start figuring out what the requirements are.
it's almost like you went through the GovClose training program here, Kevin, because that is, and he's selling Yeti bottles on his website afterwards. We can get you.
My son stole my water bottle this morning, so I had to take his, and he's even got a dog sticker. Yeah, 12-year-old. All right, he's going to the Minecraft movie tonight, so he's all psyched. And
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
My sons have been asking me to take them there, so I might have to do that.